Hello everyone, my name is Priyakshi and today I'm speaking with Mr. Ravin Mirchandani. So Ravin is the chairman at Adore Group and Quench EV Chargers is a vertical at Adore that manufactures DC chargers for electric vehicles. And in this chat, we will talk about their approach towards manufacturing and their outlook towards the DC chargers market. Hi Ravin, I was so looking forward to have you on for a chat. Thank you for joining me today.
Good day, Priyakshi. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a privilege to be here. I watch your podcast and also your newsletter every week, and you're doing a super job. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Great. So, Ravin, can we start with with Quench itself? Like, how long have you been manufacturing chargers, and what is the current scale of operations at Quench?
Okay, excellent question, and a difficult one to answer also because it's quite loaded with a lot of insider information. So we've been manufacturing DC fast chargers now for 3 years. We started in 2020 during the lockdown. In fact, it was a lockdown baby, so to speak. And so today we have about 350 fast chargers installed on roads globally. And these range from 30, 60, 120, and also now the 180 kilowatt capacities. You know, in the scheme of things, are we big? No, we're still a little baby company that's trying to find its feet globally. But are we happy with where we've got to in the 900 days that we have been designing, manufacturing, and installing chargers? Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. So tell us about your manufacturing setup. I understand you're manufacturing in Pune, but what can you tell us about it more?
Excellent. So we have a 7-acre campus in Pune. It's our mobility campus. We have about 250 engineers here who work on all things to do with mobility, whether it's safe roads or clean roads or zero emission mobility. At this campus, for the last 40 years, we've been manufacturing and designing equipment to help make all sorts of clean energy, clean mobility enabling solutions. So that could be batteries. We don't make batteries, but we provide equipment, designs, and solutions to people who make batteries. Whether you're making a lead acid, lithium ion, sodium ion, nickel cadmium battery, or if you're making a hydrogen electrolyzer, you know, we make power sources. We make testing equipment, lab equipment, design equipment for these kind of industries. Making a fast charger wasn't such a big leap for us because we intricately understand the battery that the fast charger is going to be charging. So at this campus here, we have two different operations. One is battery and the other is fast charging. And fast charging now, has about 45 people in the 3 years of operations. And we are split up into teams based on design, software, power electronics, and then of course, service and installation and commissioning. We also have a NOC, Network Operating Center, where we speak to all of our assets installed on the road 24/7. They talk back to us with a heartbeat of 5 seconds, so we know pretty fast if something is wrong and what we need to do to support our customers to get them back into the road.
Okay, wonderful. So, like you talked about constant monitoring and so on. So, what I need to understand is this all comes under the software networking requirements of a charger. So, in whose purview do these responsibilities fall? Like, is the OEM like you responsible for building those communication capabilities, or is it the CPO's job or the CMS provider? Can you clarify that for us a little bit?
It's a very good question, Priyakshi. And I think the short answer is it's everyone's responsibility. And it just depends on the scale and capabilities of the downstream customers and operations on what the OEM has to do. So if you look at software today, the softwares that run a charging operation so that you get a seamless experience at the charger. First, you have the controller, and the controller controls the charging architecture. So, it controls how the converter takes AC, makes it DC, what the rest of the charger does, and how do you keep it safe. And how do you communicate with anything that is communicating with the customers? Typically, that might be an app. It might be some point of sale hardware. It might be an RFID card. So how does the customer approach the charger and get a seamless experience, having paid or having been authorized credit to charge? That's the next level of software. And that quite often is called CMS, the charge management or charger management or customer management software, depending on which geography you're on. Then beyond that, there's the communications, which is interfacing the charger, the app, as well as the GSM network to speak to the bank's paywall and make sure that the customer is able to, within 5 or 6 seconds of having connected the charger, be able to start the charging. We are capable. Your question is, do we do it? Yes, we do it. So there are some CPOs who are startups in different geographies who, maybe electrical contractors or other companies that have aspirations to be in this business. People who own maybe 20 or 30 fuel stations who want to be in the CPO business. For them, we will design everything. So we will also provide a CMS app, paywall gateway, the integration with the charger, the communications with the bank. We will provide the whole infrastructure. There are others who are very large CPOs who have already their own CMS. They know what they really want to do. They have their own network operating center tracking their own chargers also. And for them, we provide just the charger and the service to ensure that it's back in operation in the event something goes wrong through our network operating center. So the CPO, in terms of communications, is tracking a lot of data. They're tracking the customer ID, the capability to give credit, discussions with the bank in terms of exchange of information through the paywall. We, on the other hand, at our NOC, are tracking the health of the charger. So the charger is talking back to us on, is it healthy? Is it operating the way it should? Are the parameters correct? Is it efficient? Is the door closed? Has the emergency button been pressed? Are there some other issues with the charger that we need to address within the next 24 hours to make sure it's back in service, things like that. So we're tracking two very different things from the perspective of the two companies. And so there is a responsibility on both the charge point operator as well as the OEM to be responsible for those communications. So not only to have the hardware in place, but also to have the software that you've written in place to be able to do the bits that you are individually doing to keep your charger in operation.
Understood. So you talked about different markets that your chargers are already working. So can you tell us about your export focus as well? And recently there was an announcement about manufacturing in the US. So can you tell us outside India with respect to export and with respect to manufacturing, which all markets are you looking at?
Okay. So today we have chargers working in 10 countries. And these range from Europe, Southeast Asia, and Australasia. And of course, our aspirations are global. We'd like to be recognized as a company that is trusted to design and manufacture safe and resilient fast chargers for anywhere in the world. You talked about America. Yes, our joint venture company has an operation already in America that makes the same battery equipment that we make here. So we will be manufacturing in America from later this year. The NEVI program requires a significant local content to be made in America. And so our chargers that have been designed and made in India will be customized for the United States with us using local content from the United States. And from there, of course, we want to target the Americas, not just the United States of America. So the US, I would say, is 3 years behind Europe. And so whatever we saw in Europe in the last 1,000 days with this massive uptick in electric vehicle adoption will be witnessed, particularly along the east and west coast of America in the large urban centers before it starts to move inland, where the use case is very different because we have long distances, sparse population. So it'll take a while before it gets there. So our aspirations are global. We are very happy with the countries we've entered already. I'd say we're lucky maybe that we are in this position today. Perhaps our timing was right. And we hope that one day we will be recognized as a true global player and a brand for DC fast charging that came from India.
Understood. So, because I understand in the US there are already different charge point operators, who are procuring chargers. So, any game plan as to how you're going to compete there?
Okay, so that's a hard question to answer because every geography is really different, right? India follows Europe quite closely on most things. So the charge point operation model in India is very similar to what you have in Europe. America is very different, and America has got a significant amount of funding. America has non-tariff barriers to entry, so you need a lot of approvals and certification, which we're going through right now. and which we're quietly confident of being able to achieve rapidly. Once we're there, we are a local player, tested, certified, approved to be sold in America and made in America. From there on, the charge point operation business at the moment focuses on highway fast charging. So its capacity is 150 kilowatt and above. It's not for the small end of town. And today it's focusing on cars, not so much on trucks and buses. But you will see in the United States also that there will be a big move to city commuter buses moving to electric very quickly once the capacity builds up over the next 2 years for manufacturing of such vehicles in the United States. So how will we target the market? No differently from what we've done across the world, by being a value for money resilient product that people can trust. It's a vibrant market. It's a difficult market. It's one that excites us a lot. And I'd love to be here 1 year from now talking to you about what we've learned and whether we've been successful.
Okay. Coming back to manufacturing, we hear a lot about localization, made in India. So, but from what I understand, the cables, the plugs, the connectors, and different power electronic components that go into the charging equipment are still being imported. So I wanted to have your take on it. With respect to the supply chain, what all components do you think are easy to localize? And in terms of Quench chargers also, what you have been able to localize and what are the current dependencies for import?
Okay, good question. And I'll try and give you as honest an answer as possible on this, Priyakshi. First up, though, I want to preface the fact that what we make in India in a year, Chinese companies make in a week. So first up, you can't just look at what is imported and what's not. We have to look at the cost efficiencies of what you can buy local versus what you have to import. Why do I say that? Because when you face an Indian customer, particularly the large CPOs, they are very price driven. And so they're giving you a target price that you need to match aggressively. And that target price quite often excludes the opportunity to buy Indian, because the Indian company and supplier just does not have the economies of scale that a Chinese company does. So if a decision is going to be made on price, China will always win. Unless, like America, we have non-tariff barriers, restricted access to market, China will always win. And I think that this nuanced question of how much do you import, we also need to ask, what is your priority? Is it to build an Indian ecosystem, or is it to have the cheapest network and go fast in India, right? And so there is a responsibility on the country and on the decision makers of the networks as well as the OEM in making sure that the ecosystem in India is built up so that we have Indian suppliers across the value chain. Right. So let's talk about cables and connectors. Yeah, those come from China. For us, we buy them from Germany, from Switzerland, from Korea, and from China. And there are 4 different price points. The German and Swiss price point are slightly different. The Korean one is in between, and the Chinese one is way lower. We have a lot of Indian companies that want to come and talk to us to make cables and connectors. But if you put all of the Indian companies who are making fast chargers together, you'd have a few thousand cables a year. So is a big company that makes cables today going to invest significant capability to make something that's only going to be a few thousand pieces a year? And even if they do, are they going to be competitive or even more expensive than the Germans? And then if they're making such a small quantity, do they have the capability to give you a quality product, or are they going to be importing from somewhere to give you the quality elements such as the connector, right? So it's a hard question to address, and it needs a lot of policy. And it needs a lot of patriotism on the part of people making decisions to support this network, right? So I would like to support an Indian company that's making a cable and a connector, but it is going to disadvantage me in the market because my customer is giving me a very severe price point that I need to match, right? Then there's the converters, which is the AC/DC converter, SIC-based converter. We have our own. We have a 30 kilowatt and a 50 kilowatt, but we also import. We import from France and we import from China. And again, it depends on the geography, whether we install the Ador Digatron converter, or whether we install a Chinese converter, or whether we install a French converter. It depends on the price point that the customer is willing to take and the capability of us as well as a supplier to service these, because it's the core component of the fast charger. Are we agnostic to the converter? No, we're not. We want to put our own. We're developing a capability to make, a significant amount in India. But yet, even if we make 20,000, 50,000 a year in India, or maybe 100,000 a year in India, they're doing that in a week in China, right? The size and scale is different. Plus, in China, let's not forget, property is cheaper, taxes are cheaper, compliance in relation to everything that you do, whether it's a pollution control board, the green board, the local industrial development corporation, all of these is cheaper. And then there's subsidies to ensure that your product is cheaper going out, right? So we will make a converter, but it really comes down to what is the country's philosophy, and therefore what is the policy and regulations that are being driven by that philosophy to ensure that India buys Indian. Like America does that. America says, I will give you funding to 80% of your charging station if 55% of your your content, including cabinet, power electronics, software, is American. It's a very straightforward policy that says, if I'm going to be funding this as government, I want it to be made in America. Now, we don't often have funding in India, and it's a complex process because it's for the big end of town like PLI. So, CPOs aren't going to be funded for their charging station to the extent that they get in America. But we do need a policy-driven framework that supports Indian companies to develop Indian solutions to be implemented in India. And that's cables, connectors, converters. The rest is already available in India. When you look at our switchgear, we buy it from, companies that make it in India, whether it's Siemens, Schneider, ABB. These are all made in India. They're very high quality, and we use them for our exports as well, Indian electrical products. So I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Might not have been the answer you wanted, but it's the reality that we face. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you talking about it from your heart, from based on your experience and being so transparent about it. I appreciate it. So, Ravin, apart from this, you wear multiple hats. You run a podcast called Energizing India. So tell us about it. So is it a side hustle? Is it a passion? Or does it help you with your day-to-day job?
It's not a hustle. It's a passion. And I think the Energizing India team makes it magic. I just turn up for the conversations. We started the podcast. It was another lockdown baby in 2020 because we realized that when you look at the DC charging network, but for the customer to get a seamless experience, there's so many ecosystems that need to come together. And we found that nobody was talking to nobody. The car companies were doing their own thing. The battery companies were doing their own thing. The charger designers were doing their own thing. Then the government was doing its own thing. They were talking about a standard that was going to be India, TC001. What's the world was at CCS1 and CCS2. Car companies were confused. Do I want to launch an Indian standard or CCS2? Then do we bring in the Japanese standard, Shademo, because we have so many Japanese car companies in India? And so we thought, okay, hang on. No one's talking to no one. Everyone's working in silos, and that worked well for the ICE industry because the engine guy made engines, and the car guy made cars, and the oil guy made oil, and the distribution guy did distribution, and it worked okay because the system worked like that, and everybody were in a mature, 100-year-old cycle of how this ecosystem worked. That was not the case for the EV sector, and so we created the Energizing India podcast to have conversations with the key protagonists, decision makers, policy makers across the value chain, whether you were in policy regulation, making electricity, distributing electricity, making a car, making a battery, providing a charging service. We thought, let's have conversations so that we promote a synergy of views to come together on what needs to happen. We've learned a lot. I'm very privileged to be able to speak to some of the smartest people in the country through this podcast. We have a lot of fun, and we hope one day you'll be on the podcast as well, Priyakshy.
Yes, we can definitely. We'll plan it out. So I think I'll come to my last question, and that is, what kind of scale do you plan for Quench going forward in 2 to 3 years in India and also for your global aspirations?
Okay, so our capacity today is about 1,000 fast chargers a month, and so we can make about 12,000 fast chargers a year, ranging from capacities of 32 to 240 kilowatts. We will put in some additional capacity this year for 360 kilowatts because that will need a different line because the design architecture is different. So that's about DC. We have a separate campus for AC that's not manufactured here. What is the demand today is nowhere close to our capacity. So, our ability to meet the demand over the next 2 years is probably adequate. We might need only additional testing bays, additional people if the demand ramps up significantly, or if our sales team has been very good at what they're doing, for us to be able to be a recognized global player. And I would hazard that most of the competitors in the country are in a similar position. They put in significant capacity, waiting for the demand to come, but demand is going to take 1 or 2 years to come. And so we have an upside in India, I think, where we will be able to match this demand for the next 2 years before additional investment is required by any of the players in the value chain to meet the growth that will come in the industry.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time. And I wish you and the team at Quench all the very best.
So I have a question for you, Priyakshu,
Okay.
if you don't mind. You speak to the movers and shakers of the industry as well. And, we both watched the industry change significantly over the last 3 years, right? It was a curiosity to see an electric car in 2020. It's quite normal to see an electric car in 2023. And a significant quantity of the 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers we see on the road are fast moving to electric. So from your conversations that you're having with the industry, what is your forecast for 2024 and 2025 for the EV sector? What are we going to see?
I think we're going to see increased adoption in light electric vehicle space. And I also see in this space, of course, these were the first segments to adopt because the economics made a lot of sense. But I also see a consolidation, or at least people who came up with a very opportunistic approach in the beginning, who did not pay any heed to the quality of the product or safety reliability, because of the consumer awareness and also because of the regulatory awareness. Those people are going to be weeded out, or they'll have to step up their game in case if they want to survive. Because I feel that in light EV space also, when the big guys, the Bajaj and the TVS, who have been traditionally relying on their technology and who have been the legendary players, once they step up their game and enter the market, people who don't have the quality will be weeded out. The price alone will not help them survive for a very long time. And of course, there is a little bit of skepticism about whether the fame will continue, whether it will not continue. So I don't. So let's see what happens there. But my prediction is that it will consolidate, and it will consolidate, and it will be overall good for the industry, good for the ecosystem. For 2-wheelers, for 4-wheeler space, I think it's still a lot of early adopters who are buying these vehicles. Though of course there is always a conversation whenever a friend or a relative wants to buy a new car, they have at least started considering that this is my budget, I want to buy a car. Do I have is there an electric car that fits my budget? Can I consider it? A year ago or a year and a half ago, I did not see that even being a consideration. And the major factor was there, if I have to do an intercity trip, if I have to go from Delhi to Chandigarh, what will I do if I run out of charge? So, but you can now see even on that route, I do that route quite often. So on that route also you can see EVs running, and it's good to see that it always a consideration now when you are planning a car purchase. So that's good. Early adopters are already there, and I see as more companies are coming up with the new models, and also the models in more economy price segments, we will see more adoption. So I think the future for electric is bright, and I'm very pumped to see what follows.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that answer. I agree with you completely. I think our considered view here is that people who are buying a car in 2023 or even a motorcycle that is an ICE vehicle, it's probably the last cycle of them buying an ICE vehicle where ICE is the natural choice. When these vehicles come up for renewal in 3 to 5 years, they will almost be agnostic to the choice of fuel, whether electric or ICE. That just won't be a consideration. It will be quite normal, and the decision-making factors will be other things. It won't be about whether I can get there. Will I be able to charge it? It will be about price and comfort and sex appeal and other things of the vehicle.
Right. I think you are playing a great part in helping people curb that range anxiety that comes with intercity travel. So kudos to you and your team.
Thanks very much. Actually, pleasure having been here. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you, Ravin. Take care.
Cheers.